Yeah, I did mention a certain somebody, and I said, you love all types of ideas except for this guy, Sam Seder. And for some reason, he didn't respond to that.
Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air.
All right, so the Majority Report did a fun little interview with this guy, Mason, who is one of the Jubilee regulars on the 20v1 show, and he was one of the debaters that went up against Dave Rubin in his recent episode, where Dave Rubin essentially just got washed by every single person, like probably the worst performance of any of these Jubilee debates. So if you're interested in watching that but don't want to give them the view, I did a live stream watching it, so you can go watch that. I'll put the link in the description. But essentially, this guy was one of the guys who went the hardest against Rubin and brought up the tenant media thing, as well as a couple other things that were meant to be pretty scathing, bringing up that Dave Rubin is close personal friends with Michael Knowles, who's a part of political groups that want to eradicate gay people, gay marriages, gay parents. And so during this debate, you can kind of see that Dave Rubin gets demoralized pretty early and runs out of steam, as well as seeming to come to this debate with just almost nothing to say. He doesn't have good talking points, doesn't have any numbers, and as a result, he gets dog walked by every single debater and also the Jubilee fact check, which has been a little dicey in the past in terms of like who's doing the fact checking. But in this particular episode, it was pretty straightforward, and I don't think there was a single fact check that backed him up. And it's purely his own fault. He just came completely unprepared. Most of these Jubilee debaters are people who do it regularly, people I've seen before. So I'm not going to go over too many clips here, but I think they play at least one in this exchange. But essentially, Mason just goes over kind of what happened here, what it was like debating him, as well as some interesting moments that got cut out of this, including apparently Sam Seder's name coming up.
I'm quite sure that they, at the very least, let me see it and suggest edits before it went out. And I frankly couldn't remember what was cut or not cut at that time. So I said fact checks. But my understanding is that Dave Rubin may have asked for certain edits. And let's play the beginning of your segment, and you tell us what might be missing from that.
Okay.
For your seats.
It's been fun. Oh, she had it. All right.
Dave.
All right. Hi.
Good to meet you. I'm actually a big fan. I've been watching you since like all the way back in the Sam Harris era.
Oh, yeah?
And then I remember you
softening me up. Okay.
No, you brought on like Stephen Molyneux,
Yeah.
like the white nationalist. And I was like, this guy just loves ideas. He just loves all different types of ideas. I love that.
Now pause it for a second.
but yeah.
Now pause it for a second. Keep it on Dave's face there for 1 second. Do you think, because certainly the other people sitting there knew that you were mocking him, do you think when he gave you this look that he understood that, or was he just like going to some happy place in his head?
Or there's a third option. Was this cut to him after something else had been said that was not included in the recording?
Yeah, I did mention a certain somebody, and I said, you love all types of ideas except for this guy, Sam Seder. And for some reason, he didn't respond to that. He just kind of let it glaze over and stared into my eyes.
Okay, so you said except Sam Seder?
I don't know why.
Wow, that's interesting. I guess
Sam Harris they left in.
Yeah, I wonder why they left
a lot in. At one point in the debate, I say, you suck Trump's dick, and they let that in the final cut. But a mention of Sam Seder, that's too controversial, too personal.
Wow. All right. And did my name come up at any other time?
There were a couple other people. I know Evan for sure brought it up. He had spoken to Dave back in like 2019. He did his book tour that was like, what was it? Don't burn this book. Like controversial ideas that no one can talk about. I forget what the book tour was. But Evan asked him, like, why won't you debate Sam Seder? And then in their rematch for this Jubilee debate, he was like, I met you once in 2019. I talked to you about why you won't debate Sam Seder, but I can debate you right here. Let's just go ahead and move on with this. That was also conveniently cut.
Interesting.
Wow.
Well, Dave, if he doesn't want that name associated with him, I can understand it. But if I was Dave, I would have cut out all of the segments
Yes.
and everything.
No, Sam, you've been on the other end of this, but for the people that are in the circle, you don't know who you're speaking to until the day of. Like, you can have speculation and they'll give you some of the topics, but you never get confirmation until you see their face walk in the room. So it was.
So how'd you feel when you saw that it was Dave?
As a group, were you all just so excited?
I was excited that I get to do bits, but I was mad because I'm like, this is not going to be like an exchange of ideas as much as Dave says that he loves. This man doesn't really have any ideas. But I was more flabbergasted that he had a month to prep, or however long Jubilee let him know he was going to do with Surrounded. And he came with no prep. He just walked in thinking he's going to talk to a bunch of woke liberals and talk about pronouns for 6 hours. And he got schooled on every single issue. It was so embarrassing.
We're going to go through more of this. I mean, because that's what struck me too. I was like, did he not know that he was doing this until like 15 minutes before? Who did you speculate it could be?
Well, I've never been like intimidated by like the intelligence of a conservative. Like, all of the people that are lauded as like these big intellectual titans, Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk, I've done on this exact same show format. So I was thinking it was someone like Steven Crowder, or it was going to be maybe a Dave Rubin, maybe an Erica Kirk. I honestly didn't know who it was going to be. All we were told was it's one MAGA defender versus 20 far left Democrats, which honestly seemed oxymoronic in itself. I don't understand what they meant by far left, because it was all culture war issues, but they were kind of buying into that right-wing framing of wokeism and all that culture bullshit. But for me, after all of the surroundeds that I've been on, this was easily the most like vitriolic that the circle was towards a figure in the center. And I think it's because we all knew how ridiculous he was. Like, nobody felt intimidated. Everyone was laughing at everything that he said. He was speaking in vague, conservative talking points that if you ask the average conservative high schooler about political issues, they'd give the same answer.
Yes.
Government bad, the market's good, we need more competition. Every time he was asked for a specific metric, he just completely fell on his face. And then another part was Parker called him out on all of the economic metrics. I think you guys talked about that yesterday on the show. He went to the green room. That was before the halftime or whatever. He comes back from the green room. He looks at Parker and he says, by the way, I looked it up on Grok, and there's actually a lot of economic metrics that Donald Trump's better than Joe Biden on. And they did not keep that in there. But I'm like, dude, what a perfect example of how this guy gets his information. He literally is typing prompts into Grok and saying, there we go, objective truth, baby. That's what I need.
Well, there is ideological diversity on the right then, because Jillian Michaels just uses ChatGPT. So you can have it.
Or Gemini, maybe.
Oh, Gemini.
She's using the Google.
Or Claude? Who knows? But that's where you get the differences of opinion. Which AI are they going to use in order to bolster their political ideology and their points?
Yeah, so a lot of interesting details here, and I won't go over all of it for too long, because I know these 20v1 debates are stupid, and it's this like dumb spectacle that we all kind of decided a while ago isn't worth very much. And, at worst, it's this like tribalistic blood sport. In the case of Mehdi Hasan's debate with a bunch of far right Republicans, which is what that debate was billed as, he ended up debating just straight up racist, fascist, saying that he needs to be deported from the country. People saying that the idea is to take over democratic systems democratically and then take away democracy. I mean, that was the kind of far right Republicans that were being hired by Jubilee to do this, which, sounds about right, honestly. So this is, I guess, their version of a counterpart to it, where they have far left Democrats. And again, it's the usual cast of characters, not anything close to the type of far right rhetoric that you got, in a pretty standard Jubilee episode. It seems like the genesis of this show was showing off a lot of pretty alarming right-wing rhetoric. It started with Charlie Kirk, I think, was the first one to do the show. But I will say that this episode is like undoubtedly good for the discourse. It's good that it's out there, because there's just no way anyone can say that Dave Rubin won this debate. And it is good that if they're going to put out stuff like that, fascistic nightmare that ended up happening in the Mehdi Hasan debate, it's good to see the opposite as well, where somebody who is truly unprepared and honestly just like shouldn't even be doing commentary at all is able to be shown for what he is, for all of us to see. At very least, if they're going to do the type of racialized culture war blood sport that they do, the very least they could do is humiliate somebody like Dave Rubin for the sake of fairness. And Mason says that the circle had more animosity towards Dave Rubin than anybody else that he's seen, which I find interesting. That reminds me of what Joe Rogan said about Dave Rubin many years back. People who are Majority Report lore fans will remember this, which it seems like Mason is. Back in the day, Rogan said that he thought Michael Brooks in particular was too harsh on Dave Rubin. He used Michael Brooks' name specifically, but did not name Dave Rubin specifically. But it was obvious who he was talking about. And the comment he made was that he feels like it's unfair because Dave Rubin is a little slow and that it's kind of like going after a wounded gazelle, like the wounded animal in the pack. And there's something about him saying that they all really dug into Rubin in a way that they might not for other people who are better at arguing these atrocious positions. But I think it's the fact that Rubin is so intellectually bankrupt, morally bankrupt, and he just didn't even try. You can smell the weakness. And so people who did come prepared for this debate, as well as having zero sympathy for a guy like this who has sold himself out, his own people, his own sexual orientation out to the Republican Party, there was just, no mercy there. And that is what led to the episode that we got. And, apparently he was visibly demoralized by the end of it, exhausted, which you can see. You can see in the video that he really is not into it. And he's just getting pummeled on every single point. It makes you wonder why he did it. If he wanted to do this, maybe they got him to, paid him, offered him some money. I don't know what it is, but it went viral for him in the wrong way. And the truth is, the point that I was making as I was watching it is that it is a failure that somebody like Dave Rubin even has a career. It's a failure on the part of all of us in the public square to regulate itself properly. Obviously, that's not all the fault of the consumer, because there's these structures behind the scenes that prop up people like Dave Rubin, including with money coming from Russian oligarchs and other oligarchs. But the real tragedy of it is that even with a humiliation like this, Dave Rubin will continue to be floated, and he's still going to be around as long as he's useful. The only reason that this genuinely might hurt his career is because he did not make himself useful to the movement that he's debased himself for whatsoever. If anything, he's kind of getting in the way of it, making them look bad, as well as the fact that, you have Republicans openly tweeting that homosexuality has no place in America at all. So, that's what certain factions of the Republican Party are fighting to make the mainstream. And meanwhile, Dave Rubin is still trying to find his place in the mix. So, it's the truth is a guy like this doesn't deserve any sympathy, because he purposely avoids the fact, even when it's put right in front of him, that these people that he's empowering are directly out to hurt him and people like him, and absolutely would stand by as his rights were stripped away by the Supreme Court or some other means if that's aligned with their views. Michael Knowles would absolutely allow for Dave Rubin's marriage to be dissolved, for his adopted child to be taken from him. If that is what the political conditions in this country came to, that's absolutely what he would do. And that's really what it comes down to. Dave Rubin wants to make this moralistic argument. Well, the left is just so mean to me because I have different ideas than them. And this surely only drove that home for him more, because they were so mean to him. But the truth is, and he knows this, although I don't think he allows himself to think about it very much, but the nature of the project that he is helping to build is one that will and does harm people like him. He just doesn't care. And so as long as he is propped up and making money off of that, he's a good source for derision. And that's exactly what Michael Brooks identified about him years ago. So the last thing I want to touch on before I wrap it up is the primary elections that happened last night. California, as well as a couple other places, had some primaries happen. So some interesting updates there. As of right now, it does not look like Steyer or Rahman are going to make it through to the second round. It's possible, because there's still a decent amount of votes to be counted in both cases, specifically in the governor's race, though. I don't see really any situation where Rahman would surpass the Republican who's coming in second place to Karen Bass. So whoever it is that comes in that second place slot is going to be the one that faces her in November. And it's the same dynamic for governor as well. These primaries in California are weird because essentially all these people run at once. So on the governor's ballot, you had like 30 people. And basically the top 2 are the ones that make it through to the general. Very bizarre system, and it makes it kind of unpredictable what's going to happen. It looks like Becerra and the Republican, Steve Hilton, are going to be the ones that make it through. They're the ones with a steady lead. There's a possibility that there's enough votes in there for Steyer that he could take the lead. I don't see it. Seems like, that's pretty cemented at this point, but we'll see if anything changes there. So not a good election for progressives in California, leftists in California. There was a lot of splitting that happened over Butch Ware not ending up on the ballot. A lot of people wrote him in instead of voting Green Party. There was no Green Party candidate on the ballot. Also, Katie Porter should have dropped out. If she had dropped out, chances are good that Steyer at least would have had a better chance. He would have been much closer to that margin. A lot of the people who may have been inclined to vote for Steyer were instead Katie Porter voters. So, I don't see any excuse for her not to have dropped out. She must have been offered something by Becerra to stay in the race because they knew that would hurt Steyer and not him. So, looks like corporate candidate Becerra is going to be facing off against a Republican in November. He'll probably win. It's unlikely that a Republican is going to win, even though the Republican performed very well in this primary. It's important to remember that that's among primary voters, a very small portion of the electorate that he needs to win that second place spot. It's part of why the jungle primaries are stupid. So in the general, since Becerra is the corporate standard Democrat candidate, he's almost certainly going to get an enormous amount more support. Not a guaranteed thing. We'll see. Could be a closer race than anybody wants to see. But there also have been some positive progressive movements in places like New Jersey. Hamawi is a candidate who won. This is another Hassan Piker-backed candidate who has done really well. So the electoral effect that Hassan seems to have, at least in Democratic primaries, is to boost candidates without too much of a downside. So we'll see how that works out for Abdul El Sayed, but this has now worked in 2 separate cases, not only attributed to him, but definitely he is the most prominent figure bringing attention to some of these smaller candidates and makes a huge difference in these races. So I think what that's going to mean, since progressives aren't necessarily performing well across the board, seems to be a pretty specific set of criteria. What that means is that the corporate Democrats are probably looking at that and saying, okay, Hassan Piker and that wing of the Democrats is a threat, and so we've got to try to isolate that. And we have an opportunity to isolate that because candidates like Becerra or Spanberger or other standard Democrats are still performing well enough to get elected. So they view that as a lifeline, and that means that nationally the left has to get its shit together one way or the other, which is a tough ask. I mean, the left is a sprawling amount of people that have a lot of different views on like what needs to happen politically going forward. So I think having voices like Hassan out there that are arguing for electoralism is important, even if there also is agitation on the outside, non-electoral activity. Both of these things can coexist. And I think rather than taking away from this, like, Steyer was the candidate everybody should have got behind, or everybody should have got behind writing in Butch Ware. There's genuinely people out there that think that. I think really the answer is we have to be able to land on a more unified idea of who the person is to go for, whether it's on a national level or a state level in these governor races, whatever it is. There's just got to be more of a sense of diligence and a sense of pragmatism when it comes to elections specifically. And it doesn't mean you have to throw your entire, political identity or your entire sense of what's going to happen in the future, what's possible behind a certain candidate. It just means that, pragmatism, I think, electorally is something I'm going to continue advocating for consistently, even if it's controversial for some reason. I don't think it's going to be possible for us to prevent the corporate wings of the Democratic Party from continuing to entrench power unless we're fighting them electorally, making the environment hostile for them electorally, which we have been doing. It's not enough to push certain candidates like Steyer over the top, but if he had been more aggressive on certain issues or had been willing to come out more strongly for Palestine and against Israel, that's the kind of thing thing. That's the kind of fighting that is helping to push people over the edge, like in the case of Zoran Mamdani. And I really think that with him, that could have been a missing piece, is being able to speak to that pro-Palestine flank. For any candidate that wants to run against the establishment, that is an essential piece of the criteria. And that seems to be a consistent lesson that we can take away from some of these elections, in my opinion.